Hey there, Thomas Cox here with Jim Prinzing for another episode of M2 Managing Managers. And today we're going to talk about how Jim learned what might be one of our core lessons here, which is the tension or the seeming tension between building relationships with your subordinates and your staff and driving excellent performance from your staff. Is that a fair assessment of the dichotomy, Jim?
Yeah, that struggle. I mean, for years and years, I fell in love with servant leadership in the 90s.
You were
Church,
like 18 when you were like
yeah, I was close. Yeah, I was like a 22-year-old
20
general
something.
manager. Yeah.
I'm
And
sorry, you were a 22-year-old general manager. I just want to pause there
well,
and
actually, I
go,
was a 21-year-old general manager, but I think I came on
I
servant
barely
leadership when I was
managed
22.
myself at that age, and you were running a restaurant. All right.
Yeah. I literally had no idea what I was doing. Luckily enough, I had an amazing mentor. He was actually the head of HR of the company I was working at, and he introduced me to Robert Greenleaf and Peter Senge, and you know, from there, it just opened up a whole world of leadership tools that I didn't know existed. So, yes, and I fell in love with servant leadership, and it really
Which is very
aligned with
relationship based, right? It's very
yeah,
relationship
yes,
focused. It's very
in
much about building
service, in
trust.
service of others. And I realized that it aligned with my own personal ethics and values and kind of how I view and go about the world. So I got into leadership because I saw an opportunity to make work better and I wanted my coworkers to have a better work experience. So I said, "Hey, I'll be the manager." And that's what I worked on.
And you
So,
you previously suffered on some people who were maybe not so good, which made you think,
yes.
yeah, I can do better than that.
Yes, and probably also introduced a little bit of micro trauma that made me averse to other styles of more authoritarian styles of leadership. So, servant leadership was like, wow, this is the opposite of those things that I do not ever want to be.
Right. I hated that thing. This is the opposite of that thing. I'm going to go to the opposite of the thing I hated.
Yes,
Absolutely. Perfectly legit way of feeling your way through the
yes,
universe.
yeah, yeah, 100%.
Except,
Except it came with drawbacks,
yes.
right? I cared deeply about my people. I was incredibly supportive, listening, understanding. I'm naturally a high empathy person. And when I applied those things to leadership, I got great results because I had teams that were incredibly loyal and they were, they knew that they were cared for. They had a great work experience. We overall had a great culture. However, I started to understand probably about 10, 12 years in that I was there was a ceiling that I was hitting.
Mm,
There was a
mm.
performance ceiling. It was like people would rise to a really good level, but we'd have moments of excellence, but we didn't have sustained excellence.
Interesting. So you high loyalty. I mean, people showed up and wanted to do good work. They didn't want to disappoint you. They wanted to look good in front of their coworkers. And so you were not like in the pits. You weren't the worst restaurant in the chain by any
No,
means,
no, not by any means.
but you saw headroom that you guys weren't reaching into.
Yes. Simultaneously, I had other leaders come through who I kind of looked at it like I started to try on different leadership hats. And I also had the opportunity at that time to move positions multiple times. So I could sort of reinvent myself, in each new
Hmm.
leadership position where the team didn't know me as well. It's pretty hard to change and sort of flip the switch in place, but it's fairly easy to sort of reinvent yourself when you change, positions and even regions and move to a different state every couple of years. So I started to
Right.
try on these different hats, and I tried on a super authoritarian hat because we had a very authoritarian leader in the company at that time. So I started to emulate some of his behaviors, and it immediately failed because it just wasn't authentically me.
Right.
Right.
And you had to try it on, if only for, a week.
Right. And I was like, it's like trying to pretend that you're angry when you're not. Right. It's like
Sure.
it just was so not me that it just didn't
Well,
work.
I want to acknowledge you though for trying out new things. I think that's an incredibly important habit or skill or something to get into for anybody in leadership is don't be so afraid of new stuff that you're not willing to like just try something out to see if it's going to work or not. And if it fails, you just back up and do the old stuff that worked.
Right.
But the willingness to experiment, I think, is tremendous. So hats off to you for that.
Thank you. And so I tried those things. I was striving for just better performance. And then I
Right. Because you
started to
could see the
realize,
headroom that you weren't reaching into.
yeah, and I started to realize, okay, I want performance, but I also want these deep relationships. I want people to feel cared for, and I want them to be doing their best work. And I started to realize and sort of build, like, I called them like little micro hacks for myself. And at this point, I hadn't come across a framework that helped me understand this. So I was just sort of self iterating, and really it was about clarity. I was like, okay, I don't want to ever terminate someone without them knowing that they're going to be terminated. So therefore, I need to create ultimate care, ultimate clarity. And the way that I framed it in my mind was I'm going to make it so clear what my expectations are, and that the reason I'm setting expectations for them is because I care about them. So I would frame these conversations around like, hey, look, man, like I need to share some really tough news with you. You're not doing X, X, Y, and Z. And if we keep going down that road, I'm not going to have a choice but to not let you work here anymore because it doesn't fit our culture and it's not fitting, you the program that we're trying to do here. But I care about you and I want to help you get better. So I would start to have those types of conversations almost, accidentally, but it was forced by I got to increase performance, but I still care about people and I want them to know that they're cared for. And that when I started doing that, that unlocked this understanding of, oh wow, when you demand excellence of people and you communicate it clearly, but they also know that they are cared about deeply and supported, yeah, it's like pouring gasoline on a fire. Like you get explosive growth and you get explosive loyalty and engagement, and you get teams that perform at an incredibly high level. And that
Okay.
was a massive unlock for me.
Got it. So how is that different from what you were doing before? I mean, it doesn't
I
sound
was
like it's
I would
hugely
pull
different.
punches because I confused.
You would pull your punches. Say more about
Yeah,
that.
yeah, and I don't like. I typically steer away from most negative statements and connotations for things, but in this one, it makes sense. Instead of delivering the tough news that I needed to deliver, instead of being ultimately clear with the performance metric that wasn't being met, I would, use the old good, bad, good sandwich or some other, mitigating tactic to sort of lower the emotional impact of
Right. You were
the
worried.
bad
Yeah.
news. I was worried that
Yeah.
I didn't want them to feel bad, right? Like being a high
Didn't want
high
them to feel
empath.
bad.
Yeah, being
Yes.
a high empath, I didn't, and I was afraid that it would demotivate them, right? I
Right.
was afraid that it would take
Sure.
away their motivation, that they would, just show up to work moping the next day, thinking that they were just, a massive pile of what, like all of those things.
Right. That they would fall apart and they would underperform and you'd have to like pull them back together again. And you would
Right.
harm the relationship with them and they would
Right.
lose confidence in themselves. And
All of those things.
you were basically treating them as very fragile
Yeah. Yeah.
in some.
Yeah.
And who knows if you might be actually a correct assessment for a few of them.
Maybe. Maybe.
Maybe.
But what I found was when I delivered the, you know, the message with clarity, but had built the trust and even delivered the message, like I still use this hack today. I call it a hack to, preface and set up the conversation instead of just bolting right in and telling someone, this horrible thing that they need to improve or whatever, right? Like
Yeah.
set the stage with, hey, I need to tell you something that's going to be really hard to hear. But the reason I want to tell you this is because I care about you deeply and I want you to be successful. And if I don't tell you this, it's it's me doing a huge disservice to you and not sharing something that might really help you. Like, and that's like,
Nice.
I don't know how long that took, 20 seconds maybe.
Oh,
But,
5, 10. Yeah.
and then pause and like, are you willing to hear it? And if not, now when, right?
Nice. Oh, okay. So can I point out what I love about that? So you're reminding them that you care about them, which they know in their heart already because of, the weeks or months or however long you've been building a relationship with them. And so it's not a surprise to them that you care about them. You're just reminding them of that. And you're doing what Chris Voss says is you foreshadow. It's like, look, I got something, you're not going to like it. I got something hard to say. He'll like tell you that something tough is coming. What Voss will tell you is that when you prepare somebody for just a few seconds in advance of what you're going to tell them, people are amazingly resilient if they know it's coming. And if you set them up with some praise first, then they're blindsided,
Right.
or they discount what you say. What you're doing is say, "Well, that's something hard to say.
Yeah.
You're not going to like it.
Yeah.
I'm only saying it
Don't start with,
because I love
hey,
you and
you're
I
doing a
believe in you
really
and I
good
want you."
job, but there's one thing I need you to work
But
on.
you're
Like,
not.
yeah, I mean, it's like
But
that's
which is it?
so disingenuous, you know.
Yeah,
And then when you sandwich it on
right.
the
And
other,
now we're making it about your emotions and not their performance. Okay, so I was recapping what I love. So there's the setup of why I'm saying it's because I love you and I want you to do well. There's the Chris Voss hack of like letting them know, like, okay, this you're not going to like this. This may be hard for you to hear. I have to tell you because I care about you and I want you to do great work. And right now you're not. And then you're giving them a choice. Is this the right time for you? And they're like, my cat just died, and I don't think I can handle it right now. Can I come back to you in 20 minutes? Like, you'd be fine with that. And most of the time they'll say, okay, yeah, sure, just give it to me now. But the fact that you paused and waited and let them opt in gives them some autonomy within clear boundaries, as we like to say. And that giving the other person some control about the pacing and the timing is respectful and helps keep them centered, I
Mhm.
believe.
Yeah.
And I think it's a really good practice, and I see it recommended by the best people, including Mark Horstman of Manager Tools, among others. So, yeah, getting their permission to opt into that, tremendously helpful. Um, Now, Horstman doesn't say to tell them that it's going to be hard to hear. So I prefer Voss for that. I prefer your approach, Jim, to
Yeah.
let them
Well,
know
it works.
it
And
works.
so what I learned from that, that was my first approach. But unfortunately, that meant that in order to end up in that situation, I'd already missed dozens of opportunities to correct the behavior before it even got there.
Oh, you waited for it to get big.
Yeah, I mean, if you're having the, hey, I've got something really tough. I mean, that happens
Okay.
sometimes it just happens and you need to have that. But I realized,
Right. It's like it's already big and I haven't had a chance to tell you before it's big.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it sounds like you had instances where it was too small to be a big conversation, so you let it slide.
right. And because of this sort of self-limiting belief that if I was, a standards driven leader, that I would be authoritarian and all of the
Right.
things that I didn't want to be, right?
Yes. Or as you called it, a
Didn't
micro trauma of your
didn't
past bad
yeah,
experiences with still
did
haunting
not
and limiting.
did not want to be a micromanager, didn't want to be a top-down leader, wanted to be a conscious servant leader, leading from the bottom up, supporting, teaching, coaching people, right? But then I realized that the best coaches don't do that. And
No.
that's really what my leadership style evolved into, was that coach leadership style. Looking at, the one that really stuck out for me was the relationship between Michael Jordan and Phil Jackson. And
Say more about that for those of us who don't follow whatever sport that is.
you've got at the time, and arguably still, the absolute best athlete on the entire planet, the best basketball player in the world at the time, right? And yet he had a coach who would give him feedback all the time.
Right.
And
Not that he was worse than other players, but that he wasn't as good as he could be.
right.
Yeah. And Jordan wanted to be as good as he could be. So he was
And
probably
Jordan
hungry for
welcomed,
that.
and of course he welcomed that, which is not always like you have to build the relationship so that the feedback is welcome. And of course, that's a whole other episode, right?
Yeah.
But I the unlock for me there was, and I used to, when I would then teach, my subordinate managers, I said early and often, it's like, we've got to give feedback. Like if we see negative behaviors, we've got to give corrective feedback early and often. And of
Yeah.
course, we want to give reinforcing behavior or reinforcing feedback for things. But, focusing on what we're talking about this episode, like delivering the information early and often when it's not a big deal. And
Yep.
so
Tiny course correction.
my own natural, like the self reinforcing thing there for me was my own natural distaste for having to have that big conversation was the the fuel that helped me have those little conversations sooner.
Right. You wanted to prevent the big ones. So you went ahead and invested in smaller, earlier course correcting
Right.
conversations.
So much better. It was like, let's have this little conversation now when it's not a big deal so that we don't have to have the big conversation later. But again, so that was just driven out of my own self-preservation, right? it wasn't it wasn't driven
Well,
by,
it was
I hadn't
okay.
learned, I hadn't learned a framework for it yet.
Right. Right.
It
You
just
didn't have
sort
a
of,
theory. You just had some practices.
right. And what came out of it was the realization that, oh, wait. So when I give people even more clarity here and they know they're cared for, holy cow. Like they really grow, they really, advance. They are really engaged. Like
Nice.
they know what matters and why it matters, all of those things. And so I started to see that it was a real force multiplier
Nice.
to combine those two things.
Okay. So it sounds like you went through a real progression of, um, early on, just having a strong distaste for the authoritarian, critical, criticizing, finger waggy, yelling at people style of leadership. And maybe you underperformed on that dimension while you were building relationships and you were like trying to be a good, supportive, I wouldn't say a friend, but friendly, certainly, and caring and a champion for other people's excellence. Uh, but you would not push people out of their comfort zone maybe as much as you later realized you could have. And I'm gonna suggest that may be, for me at least, that's the key to really getting people to grow is make sure they know they are, so we say, psychologically safe. They won't be blamed, shamed. They won't be made to feel bad. Like that's the purpose of. I'm not going to set out to make you feel bad. You might feel bad if you did a bad job, but that's because you care about doing a good job. But that's not the level of I'm worried about. I'm worried about you feeling shamed or
Okay.
called out or diminished
Right.
socially
Yeah.
in some
Dehumanized
way.
in some way.
Yeah, dehumanized in front of the
Yeah.
group, and everyone's like, "Oh, I don't want that to happen to me. Oh my god!" Like that's not the font of good motivation. That's the font of fear-based motivation and avoidance. It's like the last thing we want. So you knew you didn't want to do that, and you only later found that really challenging people into their own excellence worked. And then you found that you could do it in smaller bites earlier. And so you wouldn't have to wait for a big course correction conversation later. And that it was actually compatible with its strong relationship rather than competing with. Is that a fair assessment?
1,000%.
Okay. And so I was shocked to discover that um, discovery, if you will, that there's this synergistic relationship between what we call building trust or building relationship and then driving excellence, that they actually reinforce each other rather than competing with each other. Some guys at Ohio State in 1964, Blake and Mouton, published the first finding that was the case. And it's been roundly ignored ever since by almost everybody.
It's true.
And there's a very few people. I totally put my hat off to Manager Tools and Mark Horstman for them being on top of that truth. But hardly anybody else ever talks about it. And we need to, because once you realize that there is this synergistically positive relationship between, in our formulation, you've got to be in self-command. You've got to be calm, curious, empathic, steady, untriggered. You're not going to give them feedback from anger. You're not going to be like, I'm really scared, so I'm going to try to over control people. Like all those negative emotions that could drive you as a manager, because all those negative emotions accelerate as they come down the power gradient to other people. And if you're a little scary, they get very scared. Um, and if you're a little mad, you seem a lot mad because you have your hands around the throat of other people's need for food, clothing, and shelter. You have your throat around them providing for their families. And so anything that comes from the boss that seems in any way negative is going to feel amplified. So you've got to be as Zen-like, I would say, as you can be. You can be passionate, but you're not going to be mean, and you're not going to be over controlling, and you're not going to be driven by your own fear or your own anger when you build relationship and when you uphold excellence in the ways that we love to champion.
Yeah. And the unlock there for me, once, so I was doing this sort of by accident. And then
Right. You felt
you,
your way into it.
yeah. And then you and I met and you introduced me to the 2R manager concept.
The wonderful Pete Friedis book that
Yeah. The Pete
popularized
Friedis
it for
book.
me. Yeah.
And I realized in my mind, I had visualized sort of this relating and requiring on a continuum that
Where if you did more of one, you had to do
you
less
had
of
to
the
do
other.
less of the other. Yeah. If so, I wanted to be a relator. I wanted to build relationships. So therefore, I had to require less. Like I realized how fat, what a fallacious mental
It,
model I had
it
around that.
feels true. It's just wrong.
Even though I built some like, I thought of them as like hacks or workarounds that helped me require better and they worked. But Pete Friedis unlocked the thinking that this is actually an XY axis. Like we've got, relating on one axis and we've got requiring on the other axis. And we actually want to do just enough of both. And when you do just
I
enough
will
of
put
both,
the visual on screen
oh,
to
perfect.
illustrate.
Yeah, when you do just enough of both and hit that middle box, it is the biggest unlock in the world for
Yeah.
performance, for engagement, for loyalty, for uh, retention.
Right.
It's where people truly do their best work.
Right. And I will restate, I think most people imagine that there's only three positions. There's the high demand, high requiring, low relating sweatshop space. There's the country club pleaser, high relating, low requiring space, which is not exactly where you were, but you were kind of close to it. And then there's this abdicator space of relating and not requiring, and you're not even doing your job at all, and you create a hellhole. It's like those are the three spots, and I got to pick one or pick a spot to stand in that's somewhere between them. And it's just not true. There's this vast space over here where you relate enough to be good at it. You relate enough to build trust without like, living out of their pockets, or they have to come to your house for dinner every night, or like there's too much sharing. And then requiring enough to get their best out of them without, you know, being crazy or overdoing it, if you will, because you can overwhelm people. You can absolutely over-relate. And the trick is to do exactly as much as you need to get the best out of your people. Everybody is unique. And the way you build relationship with one person is a little different than the way you build with the next person, even though they're both on the same team and they both do the same job. And you'll see this with coaches where, two defensive ends like both screw up on the same play. And the coach will go over, grab the face guard of the first guy and scream in his face, go to the second guy, put his arm around his shoulder and talk
Right.
gently to
Yeah,
him.
yeah,
And they both do better on the next play because he knows what they need
yeah.
to get into their zone
Yeah. And by the way, you don't know what they need if you don't spend
initially,
time on the relating.
because you've got to understand, you have to have such a clear mental model of how they work on the inside, that you know what gets the best out of them. And it's always going to be different for every person.
I think what's amazing about that model is it, it almost doesn't need studies or lots of data to support it, because if you just think about the best boss or the best coach or the best teacher that you ever had, they did
They
that.
almost certainly did
They,
this
they had to do that. Otherwise, you wouldn't,
because they wouldn't be the best boss
they
you
wouldn't
had.
be the
Like they
best.
wouldn't have gotten the
Do
most
that.
out of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Certainly, when I think about the bosses I had, I learned something from every boss. Uh, I had one boss who was, the sweatshop guy. I learned a tremendous amount of result. I can go back and think about all the lessons I learned from it, but I was certainly not put him in the best boss box. And then I had bosses who were very relational, very warm and friendly and all those things. And, I almost consider them friends, right? But I wouldn't again consider them a best boss, because like they don't come up for me when I think about my best
They
boss.
didn't really push you out of your comfort zone into your maximum performance and
Yeah.
maximum growth.
Yeah, the person who comes up for me as the best boss is the one who did the right amount of both. The right amount of both. And it's when you've got that person in your life, it's one of the most amazing relationships that you can have. So if you flip that around and think, wow, how do I do this for my team?
Yes, that would be lovely.
It's it's a major unlock. It's huge. It's so cool. It's one of the best things that you can possibly experience as a leader.
Watching other people grow so rapidly and step up so amazingly and take
And be
on
that
more
be that
autonomy.
person for that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Be the person who grows leadership in others. The one of the tricks that I keep in my head, and I'm not sure I've shared it in
Mm,
these words here on the podcast before. How do you know when to push somebody? And there's a feel you'll get for it when they've done all the components of good work, but they haven't put it all quite together yet. And you think they're ready for the challenge and they don't think they're ready. The thing is that most of us will feel ready for the next step long after we're capable of it, because our competence will grow faster than our confidence.
mhm,
Often, not always. Some people are overconfident, but for most of us. And so what you as a boss can do is you'll notice, oh, Chris over here has led small group meetings and has been to the staff meeting many times and has done all these component pieces. And I think that's all that's needed. So I'm going to say, Chris, you're running the next staff meeting. And Chris is going to go, I'm going to what? Because Chris has never done this. It's like, okay, I'll give you one more to watch, but the one after that, you're leading it. It's like he's going to be in front of his peers. He's going to be a leadership role. He doesn't want to flub up and look like a clown in front of his peers. Oh my God. Because you've been watching Chris closely and you know what it means to follow an agenda and create an agenda, like you know what all the component behaviors are that come together into success. And if Chris is looking really shy about it, you can point out, look, you've already done this, 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 and this. You've done the four major pieces that make up that. You just haven't done the that yet.
mhm,
But if you build on these four pieces, you can get there. Watch one more, but when you go to the next staff meeting, I want you to be sitting thinking about yourself running it rather than yourself participating in it. Because you'll see the whole meeting in a totally different way. And maybe we'll, record it and you can watch the recording. But after that, you're doing it. In fact, I'm going to announce it in this next one that you're leading the one after that. Ah. And so the way to there's something called titration, if I'm hoping you use the word correctly, where you're essentially um, giving people exactly the right amount of a thing to have the right effect. And in this case, it's the right amount of stress. And the way to titrate up or down with stress is to it, if someone's performing so well that they're like, I think I need to push them, increase the stakes or increase the audience or shorten the timeline or raise the bar of performance. Like everyone else is getting an 80, but you got to, your target's 90. What? But dude, you've been so far over 80 every week. It's like, I don't think you're stretching yourself, man. Come on. Whatever that. And if on the other hand, the person feels like they're struggling a little bit, give them more time, shrink the audience, lower the stakes. And there's lots of little levers you can pull on to give them exactly the right amount of stress to get their best performance. And it turns out that the right amount of stress for optimal performance is not zero. You can be understressed to the point where you aren't really paying full attention. And you can be overstressed to the point that you freak out and collapse. And somewhere in the middle is the zone of optimal performance. And that's research from 1908.
And stress alone isn't the thing that causes disengagement and, causes someone to collapse, right? It's
Right.
stress without trust, support, and purpose.
Yeah. And,
If
and
you're
yeah, and
if you're
enough
feeling if you're feeling
competence to perform.
it's if you wake up and you have excruciating pain in all of your muscles and you have no idea why you got it, you freak out. If you wake up in pain, you have excruciating pain in all your muscles, and you did a really hard workout the day before,
It makes sense.
it makes sense. And it doesn't
And it's
hurt
even
the
better if
same.
you have been trained what to do. Like, okay, now you take a hot
Now,
bath or
sure,
you do
sure,
this
sure.
thing. Yeah, absolutely.
No, but
Um,
stress can equal growth. The right amount of stress with support, with trust, and with meaning behind it.
yep. And I can't resist. I got to show a visual. So, zone of optimal performance is called the eustress space. There's unstressed or under stress, and there's distress on the right. You'll see the performance peaks by definition where the stress level is optimal. In fact, you can just, you know, move someone's CNS arousal is just not, it's central nervous system. It's another way of saying stress level. And you can just like dial up the stress by shorter and shorter timelines, higher and higher stakes, whatever it is. And you'll watch the performance go up and then down. And whatever that hump is, wherever the highest performance is for that person on that task, that's their current sweet spot. And when you see someone performing at level P, you know they're either under or overstressed compared to what you've seen them do in the past when they've done better. And that's where you can do things to tweak things. And you have to know this person as a unique individual. You've got to know their signs of high stress versus under stressed in order to get them dialed in. If all you do is you always push people harder, it'll work great for the people who are at P1 and it'll just crush the people who happen to be at P2, right? And what's really fun is over time, as you get more and more practice under people's belts, you'll move their curve over where they actually perform better under higher stress. And the people who used to only be able to run the restaurant on quiet days, now they do their best work on, Thanksgiving.
Love it.
Super. So what's our wrap up and call to action for our audience?
Yeah, so that's my story. I think in a further episode we'll explore the opposite. What if you're an over requirer? What if you're,
Yeah. How do you give
a
yourself permission
tasker?
to build relationships?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And how do you unlock that? So
And that's my path because I started off my journey in 2002. I figured I'm going to learn leadership. And by 2005, I was a toxic boss and I was doing all the authoritarian stuff and it wasn't working. So we'll cover that on another time. So I would say, dear listener, dear viewer, dear podcast subscriber, we want you to be an amazing manager. And more importantly, we want you to manage other managers so they can reach their potential, because that's the most highly leveraged thing you can do in any company is give your frontline people the best leadership they can possibly get so that they can perform amazingly for your clients. And that's why the manager of managers is, we believe, the most highly leveraged position in a company, because your job is to grow the leadership capabilities of those frontline leaders. And that's what this whole series is about, is to give you the tools to do that, give you the theory you need. Because without theory, there is no learning, as Deming would say. So if you're a strong relator, if you love to build trust and you maybe hold back on challenging folks, you've learned from Jim some techniques to use.
or if
And we
you've
can,
got one of those over relators on your team,
oh yeah, someone reporting to you and like you've got it dialed in yourself. You've got a pretty good balance, like maybe like Jim, you came to it intuitively, but you're watching somebody just tiptoe around giving feedback.
yeah, yeah. Just just let them know that those 2 things aren't at odds with each other,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
That in fact, you'll have a better relationship when
that
you
might be
challenge.
so embedded in their psyche that they can't get over it.
Yeah. And if we want to do an even deeper dive on this another time, we could talk about um, some of the things that you can say as the manager of managers to help your subordinates sort of get out of their own mental traps where they're like, yeah, in theory, I guess maybe I ought to challenge them, but I can't do it. I just can't do it. And that's almost always because of unexamined and unchallenged beliefs that they're holding about, what'll happen if I do, or like, every interaction has to be good. It's like, no, just on balance, they have to be good. You want like a 3-to-1, 4-to-1 ratio of good interactions versus challenging ones, but maybe not
Right.
more than that. If you have Gottman, the researcher on marital happiness, and he's studied, happy marriages for 30, 40 years. He said the optimal ratio of positive to challenging interactions in a marriage is around 4-to-1 or so, 5-to-1. And if it's more than 11-to-1 positive over negative, that's a bad sign because you're not having the hard conversations you need to have occasionally where you got to challenge one another. But if there's too many challenging conversations and not enough positive ones, that's also negative. That's a predictor of failure in the marriage. And I think that's just true of how humans work and how we work in relationships. Oh, another excellent episode, sir. Thank you so much. And if you're watching this and haven't come to one of our workshops, I'm going to recommend you look in the description and find our link to learn more about our Manager of Managers blueprint workshops. And we'll see you again soon with another episode of M2 Manager of Managers coming to you soon. Thank you, Jim.
Cheers.